Lawyers, for whatever reason, do not look kindly on advertising. My law firm started organically. I was working in a defense capacity and I started helping regular people. And then you help one and it leads to two and it leads to four and the growth becomes exponential. A lot of lawyers created their practices on what's called a runner. It's like a guy just happens to show up at an accident scene and is like, hey, I got a lawyer if you want one.
This is some Better Call Saul stuff. Why do you think so many people ask you to come on their podcast?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of people need to fill guest spots. The other part of it is...
Meet Lee Rudin, founder of Rudin Law. Representing clients in personal injury, property damage, employment, business, and estate matters. A 6-time Rising Stars honoree, he brings nearly a decade of trial advocacy experience.
What's your podcast story, Lee?
I have been asked to appear on probably 15 different podcasts at this point. I like it. I mean, who doesn't like it?
Why do you own people's podcasts?
I think that one of the benefits of going on other people's podcasts, for someone like me, I can put it up on my website in full, on my YouTube in full. I think it adds credibility.
That's 2025 way of doing marketing, in my opinion. So you get clients out of this, basically. Am I correct?
I knew that question was going to come. And it's been one of the reasons that
Lee, your podcast story is a bit particular because you don't have a podcast, but you most certainly have a story with podcasts. So give it to me. What's your podcast story, Lee?
I have been asked to appear on probably, I don't know, 12, 15 different podcasts at this point. I like it. I mean, who doesn't like it, right? You're talking about yourself, and I think lots of people like to talk about themselves. I've been exploring the idea of starting my own. I have a lot of thoughts about the value of them in many capacities. And then going on other people's podcasts, seeing how they handle them has provided me with some good insight as to what to do, what not to do, etc.
So why do you think so many people ask you to come on their podcast?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of people need to fill guest spots. And I mean, I appreciate that they've asked me, but I think that they want somebody to talk to. They want to be able to continue to roll out episodes, because if you have a viewership or you want to build a viewership, you have to have episodes in the kitty so that each week, right, they're edited, they're ready to go, and you don't have people saying, well, when's the next one going to drop? So I think there's some of that. I've got a pretty interesting story in terms of how I've started this law firm, my branding. You can look over my shoulder. It's not your typical lawyer office. So there's some stuff here that I think is fun, and you want to entertain people. So I hope that I'm a little bit entertaining.
So then the next question is, why do you own people's podcasts?
I go on people's podcasts for two reasons. First of all, I appreciate the invitation, right? I want to meet that request if I can. I appreciate them, honoring me to have me on. The other part of it is, I think that one of the benefits of going on other people's podcasts for someone like me that has to put out content all the time, right, for social media, etc., is that I can then take that segment, I can chop it up, I can use it on my different platforms, I can put it up on my website in full, on my YouTube in full. I think it adds credibility. You don't have to have the biggest podcast following, but if somebody goes on my website and they see that my carousel of podcast episodes just keeps going, or they go onto my YouTube and they see all the podcasts I've been on, they've got to think, well, this guy must be at least remotely important because people keep wanting to talk to him.
So you get clients out of this, basically. Am I correct?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's I think, your question, I knew that question was going to come. And it's been one of the reasons that I haven't started my own podcast yet, is that I'm not a trust and estate lawyer. I'm not necessarily maybe an immigration lawyer, where the people that are going to listen to my podcast could be my clients. I don't think my clients are listening to my podcast. But what could happen is that, my idea is to bring people from a whole variety of different spaces into a podcast. Let them talk about the things that, get them up in the morning, things that they love. And then just get me and my brand out to a wide range of people, because for the most part, my clients could be anybody. And so you got to be in front of a lot of people to then, have that funnel whittled down into the person that can hire you. But I don't think that all of my viewership is going to be those people that actually need to hire me right away. It's more brand awareness, in my opinion.
So what is the story worth telling that you go on podcast for? Why the branding? Why the t-shirt stop being polite? What's that? Not your typical law firm background here. Like, what's the story behind it?
Yeah, I mean, my law firm started organically, right? I was working in a defense capacity and I started helping, regular people, not corporations, not insurance companies. And then you help one and it leads to two and it leads to four and the growth becomes exponential. And before you know it, you have a practice of helping individuals, small businesses. When I was put in a position where I had to start my own law firm, I thought about the idea of not advertising, right? Because lawyers, for whatever reason, do not look kindly on advertising. And I said, in what business would you say I'm starting a business and I'm not going to tell anybody what I do? Now, I've taken that idea and I've said, well, I'm not doing that. I'm going to advertise. And I've taken it to another level, meaning I'm willing to advertise in an outlandish, maybe in your face way, because I also believe in this era that we live in where everybody's attention is being pulled in a million directions. You've got to do something to stop the scroll, to prevent them from skipping over you if they're watching streaming TV. Like you've got to do something. Otherwise, you're just going to be lost in the muck like a bunch of other stuff that is out there. So my branding is in your face, right? Stop being polite. The back says get rude, right? Rude for Rudin Law. These shirts, I have a black version that just says in white print, stop being polite with like the ellipses, 3 dots, and the back says get rude. That shirt's the first shirt I made. I wear it's very simple. If I wear it to the mall or to the airport or really anywhere, people are always like, "Oh, I love that shirt. What's the back say?" And then they chuckle. And I think a lot of marketing is just getting their attention and getting them to remember. And for me, the merch is a tool to go have people remember. If you want to wear my shirt because you think it's cool or funny and it looks good, that's a win for me. I'll give you that shirt for free. And I do. I give them all out. So, the in your face branding that I hope people like, you notice on the front of this, it doesn't say my firm name. Not anywhere. And it's on the back, but it's not huge on the back. It's not the focal point. The focal point is get the brand out there. And if someone's willing to then go to getrude.com, which is my website, then they'll say, oh, this guy's a lawyer. And you get enough of that, and all of a sudden people realize, oh, I know that Get Rude guy.
So first of all, I love it. That's the 2025 way of doing marketing, in my opinion. Like, you cannot sell to people anymore. People buy from you. Anyways, this is a bit philosophical. I want to get back to one of the points that you touched upon earlier, Lee, which is my clients are not going to listen to podcasts specifically, right? Why are you saying that?
I guess what I mean is my clients are, I'm not creating a podcast for the purpose of reaching my particular client. I want to make a podcast that would be interesting to people in general. Just like I want to make a shirt that is interesting to people in general. Because it's hard to say, oh, my clients are this very specific subset, because everybody gets in car accidents. Everybody has the potential to fall. I'm not saying everybody is my client, but I don't want to narrow myself down in such a way that I assume that I'm tailoring my marketing, my podcast just to this small-ish subset. Do I think people will listen to the podcast and become clients down the road? Sure. Do I think that current clients, past clients might listen to it once they find out that I've got it? Sure. But it's not going to be a podcast about the law or about, how to treat after an accident. Like, that's not going to be the point. The point's just about bringing interesting people on to talk about interesting things. And then hopefully people say, oh, that guy's pretty smart. Maybe I do want to hire him to be my lawyer. Or he's really creative. Look at all the crap he's doing.
So I'm knees deep into Better Call Saul right now, which I'm sure is not an accurate representation of a law and how you typically do attorney stuff in the US, but I kind of see where you're going. So when we first talked, right, you mentioned an expression that I liked, which is podcast is the new golf round. What do you mean with that?
I think back to being on the defense side, right? When I worked in an office, a law firm, bunch of lawyers, corporate clients. What do? If you want to spend a lot of time with somebody and really have their attention, you invite them to go play a round of golf. Or maybe it's go to a sporting event, something where they're your guest, you're with them for a good bit of time,
Yeah.
you're giving them something, right? They're not paying, you're giving them something, and you're hoping to build a connection, build a relationship. I think getting invited on somebody's podcast, several of them were vendors that probably wanted my business. And so maybe there's an ulterior motive there, but I think that what you do is you invite people on like you would invite them for a round of golf. Hey, you want to be on my podcast? And they're going to say, oh, I'm flattered. That guy thinks so highly of me to ask me to be on his podcast. Or he likes me enough to want me to come to his golf club. And then you get an opportunity to hear their story, to maybe figure out points of commonality, build a bond. Who knows, what comes out of the podcast episode that then you find, hey, we can continue talking about that, or we have a common interest, and it truly builds an authentic relationship that down the road could lead to business, it could lead to friendship, whatever it is. But it doesn't start if you don't take that first step, and the first step could be around the golf, but it also could be inviting them on your podcast.
So you truly know the arcanes of B2B podcasting, Lee. And I understand your business is not directly B2B because, after all, you're helping individuals, right? How do you, in your opinion, reach an audience that doesn't listen to podcasts whilst knowing that podcast is the new gold-front? How would you work around that problem to still get to your ideal clients and still get them to, because don't get me wrong, I totally agree with you. I think vendors, I do this myself. I interview podcasters with the business behind it, period. The point though is, let's build a genuine connection. Let's tell a story about podcasts to inspire people. And hey, here is something for free that could be useful for you that you can use to improve your podcast. If you want to start the conversation afterwards, then so be it. But I think it only works if and when you do this from a genuine place of like giving first to the industry, to the guests, and then of course, is the new gold front. Everybody has that in mind. You potentially start a commercial discussion afterwards. But so in your experience, when you need to tap into an audience that doesn't listen to podcasts, how do you do that?
So I think it goes back to the original point I made, which is everybody likes to talk about themselves. Let's say, and I'll just tell you from my perspective, right? I've thought this through. If I'm going to bring a podcast guest on, my hope, beyond having that, let's say 1 hour, 30-minute conversation, my hope is that when we package up that episode and I share it with them and I share it on all my social media platforms, that they then also chop it up, share it on their platforms. They put it on their website. They do all the things that I've told you I do with the podcast episodes. So now it's not necessarily my audience that I'm reaching. I'm also reaching their audience. And so if you're strategic about who you invite, so somebody, what if I brought on the guy who owns a bunch of franchises of auto body shops, and maybe he gives out all these raffles and the auto body shop has given away paint jobs and this and that. So he's got all these followers on social media that have bought in to his raffles because they want to go get whatever free thing he's giving out. Well, now I'm in front of the entire auto body shop's social media audience, and they're like, oh, okay, that's a lawyer that I didn't know, or that's a lawyer that I've heard of before. And so now you've reached a different audience than you have yourself just by inviting somebody who's got their own platform and their own following. And I think you can do that in a variety of different ways. It doesn't have to be intentional like an auto body shop. It could just be somebody with a good story and a good following, because again, people will listen to a variety of things. So that's my thought process.
Okay, there are so many things I want to double down on here. The first thing is, aren't you afraid to aim too broad? Let me explain. The way you would start a podcast, right, would be a podcast that talks to everybody, not just your ideal clients who got just out of an accident or an injury, whatever it is, but something broader so that anybody can listen to it. And amongst them, there will be people who are actually in need of a lawyer who are like, well, but I'm actually already listening to Lee, who's pretty freaking cool, and I might just as well like look into his services and see what he does. Versus building a podcast, building an audience of very targeted content and like pain points and desired outcomes, so that for the people searching for this specific stuff of like somebody helping after an injury or an accident, they find you and are like, Lee is the go-to guy for this. What's your perspective on this? Broad marketing versus very narrow targeted ones?
I think there's a little bit of both, right? If you want to have the right marketing mix and you want to have complementary pieces of media out there, there's a way to do it. But if your only goal with the podcast is to present information to a precise audience, if that audience doesn't want to consume that information, you're never going to reach them. And I look at the podcast as part of the brand awareness side of marketing, right? So there's brand awareness, and then there's some direct response, again, a business to consumer market like I'm in. I don't think that I'm generating a new lead because somebody just got into a wreck and now they're watching my podcast and then they're calling me. The idea would be there's so much of me out there that they've consumed in a variety of ways, one of which might be my podcast or a clip of my podcast or me on someone else's podcast, that then when they do get in that accident, their mind is saying, what lawyers do I know? Oh, that Get Rude guy, I liked him. I should call him.
Okay, so it's aiming broad, but with very specific content. The channel in itself is like broad, but the thing that you're going to talk about is very targeted. How else do you do marketing? Since you don't have your podcast, you go on other people's podcasts. Do you, for instance, proactively try to be featured on podcasts that might have ideal clients of yours as part of the audience or to extend your brand awareness? But outside of printing pretty good looking t-shirts, what do you do marketing wise?
Yeah, so the focal point for our marketing is digital, and then I call it local, meaning
Okay.
I don't have billboards.
You have that.
I don't have television. We sponsor the local pro wrestling promotion. If you see, that's Bret the Hitman Hart over my shoulder. I was a wrestling fan as a kid.
Cool.
But I believe in the idea that you have to build connections with people. You have to build that more likely than not through some sort of personal interaction, right? It's hard to do it digitally in that sense. But if you can meet people, kiss a bunch of babies, shake some hands, and they get to know you over time, you'll build some local champions, and in my industry, and maybe others too, the best cases you get are by referral, whether it's a friend, a family member, a past client, a prior client, because they're already coming in warm. They already know you, they like you, they trust you, even if they never met you, because somebody else said that you're worth a damn.
Yeah.
And so the more of those you can get, the better. I'll tell you a funny story, right? The old joke is with billboards, like what's the odds that somebody gets into an accident under your billboard, right? Like they get into a wreck, they look up and there's your billboard, right? What are the odds? Well, I sponsor this local event, this local pro wrestling promotion, and we had an event. And after the event, someone that I met at the event for the first time got into an accident on their way out. And so they called me that weekend and said, Lee, like you won't believe this, but after I met you that night, I got into an accident leaving the venue. And so I called you, right? But again, it's being in front of people, building connections, right? That happens locally. Hard to do it otherwise. And then they have to know you. So when you're someone, a firm of my size, right? We're not an 800-pound gorilla in my market. We don't have 40 years worth of revenue that we're relying on. We're not funded by private equity. You have to be strategic about how you spend your money. So what we found is get out there on social media, let people know who you are. I've had so many people say to me, look, I saw your stuff on social media. People that I didn't know that have reached out. And then over time, you want to get into that subconscious. And then maybe you get the war chest to go into TV or billboards or whatever it is, if you think that's the play. And we'll take that step by step. But right now, my angle is local and digital and be as bold as I can.
Poor guy really had a self-realizing prophecy. Like he meets a accident lawyer, and what happens 2 days after, he gets into, not even 2 days after, on the very evening, gets into an accident.
Life imitating art,
Life imitating art, that's it. So I'm talking to a lot of lawyers lately, and a mechanism that I didn't know about in the US, which you don't have in France, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Is you can only get a referrer's fee for a lawyer's case, I mean, like some law related stuff, from another attorney. Like you cannot get paid for referring an attorney if you're not an attorney yourself. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, what you can't do basically is you can't pay somebody for giving you a case. It's unethical. It's not illegal, but it's unethical and you can get disbarred for it. You know, a lot of lawyers created their practices on what's called a runner.
What's a runner?
It's like a guy just happens to show up at an accident scene and is like, "Hey, I got a lawyer if you want one," or they're
No
tied in with
way.
the ambulance companies or the tow truck drivers. Like they know some way it's unethical. You shouldn't do it. You can't do it. People do it.
This is some Better Call Saul stuff. With that being said, I mean, an angle for the podcast and the podcast world, right? And I'd like to get your take on this, could be exactly this. Like, your podcast could not even be about, I don't know, accidents, lawyering, whatever, I don't even know the proper terms. Like, it could just be about talking to other lawyers. So you become the one who helps people on accidents or by being referred on by people you've been on the podcast of. Is that part of your strategy or is that something completely outside of it?
So I think that is definitely a strategy that I could see other lawyers employing, right? That makes a lot of sense. And I think that goes back to what we're talking about, which is it's not my consumer that is on the podcast or is listening to the podcast, but it could be my peer. And my peer could be a referral source, right? It could be I could invite a chiropractor for argument's sake on. And the chiropractor could say, when I get somebody that comes in that needs a lawyer, I'm going to send them to you. And people do that for sure. I have friends that are doing podcasts, and that's an angle. Again, it's the round of golf.
Is that not being a runner a bit? If you talk to the chiropractor and you tell him, hey, send me the people who arrive to you and, you know.
No, because the nuance is you're not paying them for it.
Right. But then what's in it for the chiropractor?
Honestly, what's in it? If you ask me, like I refer cases out to people where I don't get anything for it. You want to build a positive impression in the mind of the person who you've referred, right? So if someone comes and says I need help, and the chiropractor knows that I'm a good lawyer and I'm going to treat them right and take care of them, then they're going to say that was a good lawyer, and I remember who sent me there, and I should think highly of the person that sent me there because they made a good recommendation.
Yeah. Love that. Makes sense. So what's your recommendation, Lee, for podcasters? What should they bear in mind that you've seen? I mean, you've been on 15 podcasts, right? What are the common denominators, in your opinion, that make a successful podcast versus an not unsuccessful podcast? Let's say less successful podcast.
All right, I'm gonna give you two things.
Please.
All right. The first is in your mind, have a plan as to how you're going to get guests. You know, make a list. Who am I bringing on? And then that way you're not behind or you don't ever publish because you don't have enough guests. I was on a podcast that never went out because my buddy never had enough guests, or he didn't like follow through with it. And he recorded a bunch of episodes, but not enough.
Okay.
And it never went to print.
It's a bit of a waste of time as well for the guests, right? So you included it. You're like, dude, took an hour and a half out of my day to, you know, come on the show, and it's never airing.
Right. And I actually asked for that content, but it hadn't been edited together. You know, it was similar to this where they were shooting on two cameras. So like I got the content, but it wasn't something I could use because everything hadn't been synced up, and it was disappointing. The other part of it is if you're inviting someone on your podcast, don't talk the whole time. Like I know it's your podcast, but like you're going to spoil the round of golf if all you do is be on the cell phone talking to like another client, or you're yelling at the cart girl, like whatever it is. Remember, like you brought a guest here, let them actually talk.
So did you already have that? Do you have a case?
I had that experience, and I got a good chuckle out of it. Like, hey, you asked me to come down here for you to pontificate the whole time? Come on, man.
Pontificate. That is a nice term.
That's a term that goes to somebody that just wants a yap all the time. They use the $12 words.
So what's the thing in podcast? I got this from Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos didn't talk to me directly, but I like this approach of him. which is when he was building Amazon, right? He was trying to guess and to understand what's still gonna be true in 10 years from now. Well, people are still gonna want cheap stuff. They're still gonna want it fast, and they're still gonna want a good customer service, right? Somebody who cares about them. And if you have an issue whatsoever, you can reach somebody fast. Okay, so let's focus on those three things. So the question I like to ask all my guests, Lee, is, in your opinion, what's still gonna be true in 10 years that podcasters or wannabe podcasters should double down on and pay attention to, beyond preparing the guest properly and not talking all the time?
All right. I'm going to go with our attention spans are going to get shorter. People are going to be less patient. So to me, if you are looking at a podcast, maybe you're not running an hour long. Maybe you're going to 30 minutes max. Maybe your questions are like quick hits. Give me this, give me that. I don't want to hear a 5-minute story, because especially if you're going to chop it all up, like I see with your Instagram, your YouTube shorts, you want to be in that 30 seconds to a minute range. So if you got somebody chatting too long, you can't do anything with it. So I would try to be tight, have your tight questions, understand where you want to go with, and coach your guest a little bit so they know too.
That's interesting. So that's actually an answer nobody ever gave me. Coaching the guest. How would you go about that?
If somebody's not experienced in this, right, why don't you lay out what the expectation is, right? What they're going to be doing, what the questions might be. Give them an idea they can think it through, so they're not just talking to fill airspace. But also understand what you're going to do with it after the fact, right? These podcasts aren't just what they are at the moment.
Yeah.
It's what they're going to be down the road.
That's a heavy investment, right? To have a pre-brief call and then brief the guest. Would you rather not just invite the right ones, or even just post-produce, right? Fix everything in post-production. You can cut shit out. Pardon my French.
Yeah, pardon your French. I think you can do that. I think of it in terms of client, setting client expectations and good client management. So let's assume like your podcast guest, you treat like a client. I would just want to know, hey, what do you expect of me? How long is this going to go? It could be a simple email, which says, this is what you should know. You're coming on my podcast. Thank you so much. It's a touch point before they get on, maybe a couple days before. This is generally what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
I like to keep responses short so that when we want to cut them up for social media later, everyone knows like they're manageable.
Yeah.
That's great insight. It doesn't have to take all that much to prep them. You don't have to have another call.
Fair enough. I appreciate this. So for the sake of a short attention span, Lee, and I think this is a good one, because it's already lower than it has ever been, and I don't see this changing. Like, what is it, a couple seconds maximum? So that's also the perk of the podcast, in my opinion. It's like you get people to tune in something a bit longer, right? They're going to start an activity, put the phone in their pocket and listen to you for 30 minutes. But it's still hard to get someone's attention for 2 hours straight, right? Or even with pauses sometimes. So pretty solid. Lee, this was absolutely great. If people want to find out more about you, what you do, or if they have an accident getting out of their house after listening to this episode that very evening, where should people go?
What if they're listening to the episode in their car and they get into the accident?
And they're having an accident right now.
That's it. But it was your
Not
fault,
wishing
not
this to
mine.
anybody. Exactly.
No,
Not wishing
of
this to anybody. Please be safe, guys, and put the volume down so you can, be aware of your environment.
That's right. All right. So we are Rudin Law. We are based in New Orleans. I am licensed in Louisiana and Texas. We have a lawyer starting here in a couple days who's going to be licensed where I grew up in New York and New Jersey. So soon we are Gulf Coast, East Coast, but we have cases all around the country, and we bring in referral partners, firms that we're comfortable with, that we know can help our clients depending upon, where their accident or issue arose. My website is getrude.com. My toll-free number is 833-GET-RUDE. That's 833-438-7833. And you can find us on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube at Get Rude Law.
This is the branding. We'll put all the links in the description. Lee, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
You're the man, Guy. Thank you for having me.